Good morning, everyone. So I'm Ross Deuchar and I'm Professor of Criminology and Criminal Justice at the University of the West of Scotland. I'm delighted today to have Natalie Logan with me today from SISCO. So Natalie, do you want to just introduce yourself and say a little bit about SISCO first?
Yeah, hi Ross, thank you for having me on this afternoon. I'm really delighted to be having this chat with you. I'm the founder and the director of SISCO, and we predominantly work in prisons developing and delivering recovery initiatives that create a bridge between our prison communities and our communities out with. Really generally making sure these guys have good amounts of support that can help them sustain a meaningful life when they are released. So offering rehabilitation is what we do, Ross.
Brilliant. So I just wanted to ask you first of all about what is the current situation like in our prisons in Scotland? How would you summarise some of the things that you're seeing, some of the current challenges there?
I am still communicating with the majority of the men that I work with, Ross, 2 or 3 times a week actually. We are doing that through Email a Prisoner, which is a wonderful service and it's working really well. 95% of the prisoners are doing okay. They understand that we are all in isolation together. Everyone's in lockdown. They're mostly getting it for the most part. You have the 5% of prisoners that are rebelling and don't want to. Here's the thing, Ross. If you're in prison, you're anti-authority. So it's really, really difficult sometimes to comply with something because you are internally built to be anti-authority. That's what your environment, you're the product of that environment. You know, you don't like the authority. Majority of them are complying, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. You know, a lot of my guys are doing the biohazard work. So they're going in, they're getting in to clean out cells and stuff like that. So they're supporting prison, a lot of my prisoners.
Yeah. I mean, it must be particularly hard though. I mean, it's hard for us all being in lockdown, but particularly in a prison, it must be even harder, you know, to be, are they totally isolated just now, most of the guys then?
The lifers up at Letham Hall still have freedom. You know, their doors are unlocked. They can go outside and have a walk as long as they do it social distancing. General population are getting out for a phone call to their loved ones. You know, they're getting out for their bath, their showers. I was going to say bath, they're not having a bath. They're getting out for their shower and they're also getting out for exercise. But most of the prisoners that I am working with, the older prisoners, are choosing to self-isolate completely, not go out for exercise through fear. They don't want to contract COVID-19.
Right, yes. So just in a general sense, Natalie, I mean, I've been working intermittently on and off, going into prisons for a number of years through my research, but over the last year, going in as a volunteer to work with you in the recovery campuses has really opened my eyes enormously, because I've seen, you know, rather than what people think generally, I think a lot of people maybe think that if you're in prison, you know, you're maybe bad, you're dangerous, you're in there because you've done some horrific crime. What I see so often actually in front of me and when I go in is not bad, dangerous individuals, it's deeply traumatised individuals. Could you just say a little bit more about what you see among the guys that you work with in terms of trauma?
Absolutely, Ross. So I'll give you my experience. So trauma for me started before birth. And it's the same as so many of these other men. You know, my parents were both criminals. They were both very violent to one another. There was a lot of domestic violence. So even before I was born, I had endured trauma. And it's the same with most of these guys in prison. They come from traumatic environments. So your natural defence becomes violence. If you grow up in a violent environment and your parents are both violent, naturally you're going to become a violent person because we mirror our role models. So individuals in prison are only growing up because they're a product of their environment, Ross. You know, our research shows us that. If we look at someone that grows up in Springburn or Easterhouse from real dysfunction, the reality is the individual is going to be a product of the social work. They're probably then going to go through children's homes. So they're going to rebel against this system. They're only a product of what professionals have deemed them to be. You're either a good or bad person in life, Ross. Mm. And the reality is, if both your parents are heroin addicts and they both go out and steal to fund their habit, their child is going to grow up with the stigma of the parents. So they're going to become what their parents are, because they're going to, your mum and dad are junkies, your mum and dad are this. So you then become a product to that. So these guys in there are not bad people. You know, there's not a bad person in there that I've met, Ross, and I don't work with bad people. I really don't. I work with people that are prepared to change. And I think I had said this to you, you know, I can work with 60-year-old men and I look at them and what I see is a broken child that no one's ever told them, I love you, I need you, you know, there's a purpose for you on this planet. No one's ever told these guys this, you know, no one's given them any really good aspirations in life or good values or good morals. So they just grow up a product of their environment, and it's really, really, really sad.
Yeah. And I mean, what I find incredible sometimes, you know, when you go into somewhere like Berlin, you know, a lot of people, when you say you're going to Berlin, you know, they think, oh, that's full of the real tough guys, you know. And actually, when I go in and I see these deeply traumatized guys, you know, that are opening up, actually, and we have real motivation to want to change, and they're opening up and sharing their emotions and their feelings, and a lot of that, I think, is down to the culture you're cultivating in the recovery cafes. So I wondered if you could just maybe say a wee bit more about the work that you're doing there.
So the important thing for me, Ross, was when I first got into recovery, you know, when I was using drugs, my family members couldn't understand it. It was, why can't you just stop? Why can't you do this? Why can't you? No one had ever sat down and says, Natalie, why are you using drugs? What happened to you? Mm-hmm. So when we created the model and we looked at the model to work in prisons, that was my core, Ross, is the why. Why do you keep coming back to prison? Why are you using drugs? Why do you have so much pain that you would choose to stick a needle in your arm, the biggest cause of self-harm you'll ever get, to stick a needle in your arm, than someone to just sit and hug you and say, what's going on with you? So my approach is getting in there, and it's the human contact. The first thing, you know this, Ross, the first thing that I do when I go into Berlin is, whether you're an officer, a governor, or a prisoner, I'm giving you a hug. That's the first thing I do to everyone. I give them a hug, I embrace them, and I tell them, okay, how are you today? What's going on with you? Something, you know, a 58-year-old man, I gave him a hug. He came to the Recovery Cafe 2 years ago, and he's still doing really well today, actually. Came to the Recovery Cafe 2 years ago. I gave him a hug, and the guy broke down to tears, and he says, I've never been cuddled like that in my life before. How sad is that? 58 years old. Yeah. In and out of prison because he was an alcoholic, and nobody had ever sat him down and says, why are you actually drinking? What is going on? 2 years later, that guy is in the community, has his own tenancy. Yes, he's still got supports in place, but he's doing all right.
Yeah. And so a big part of the recovery process is that compassionate approach, and it's about showing love and I'm opening up their emotions and to that, I guess, which makes it seem really hard. It must be really hard for them just now that they're maybe not getting that human contact so much.
You know, are any of us really getting the human contact? You know, Ross, the example I can give to my guys in prison just now is, my mother's living on her own and she's also living in isolation. She's not getting human contact either. There's no difference between them and my mother, other than she has some additional luxuries, but she doesn't get to see her children. She doesn't, you know, it's the same thing. And as soon as the guys get this mindset that, you know, the whole world is isolating, so many people are on their own, then they get an understanding of, wait a minute, hold on, this is not the system trying to beat me down and make my sentence worse. They start to get an understanding, so they comply, Ross.
That's great. That's great,
Yeah.
actually, because it's a great read to look at it with them.
Yeah.
Because I guess it might have felt to some of them as if it's the system trying to grind them down in the beginning a little bit.
I think for most of them it was boredom, Ross. My biggest fear with them is, certainly for me when I was getting clean and sober, is not being bored, you know, being busy all the time. So that's why I was really keen to submit work to them. I spoke to yourself, you know, and you submitted some mindfulness stuff. Jed Neal submitted some stuff, James Docherty, Alec Cochrane. You know, I'm making sure that the work that I'm still sending these guys work every week. So I'm making sure the work that I'm sending them is meaningful, and I'm going to get a response back from them. You know, they're still being vulnerable. I won't let them close up, Ross, because of isolation. You know, they need to keep opening up to me.
That's brilliant.